All right, let's look at verses 7 through 11. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. This is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves that you do not lose what we have accomplished, but that you may receive a full reward. Anyone who goes too far and does not remain in the teaching of Christ does not have God. The one who remains in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house, and do not give him a greeting, for the one who gives him a greeting participates in his evil deeds. All right, so John's telling us, look, there's false teachers out there, right? There's people that get it wrong and that are trying to persuade you of something different.
Right.
And as we talked about before, like with 1 John, we see this again in 2 John. Specifically, he's dealing with these Gnostic concepts that Jesus did not come in the flesh and that the body is, in fact, a bad thing.
Right.
Right. And so John continues to clarify that we must confess Jesus came in the flesh, and anyone who denies this is of the Antichrist. Right. If we dismiss the truth, then we do not remain in the teaching of Christ. Right. So again, we're not being consistent in that teaching.
Yeah.
And that's where we would, quote unquote, lose our salvation. Right?
Yeah.
Now, however you want to look at that, you could say, well, you never had it to begin with because
Right.
you didn't truly believe it. If
Yeah.
you truly believed it, you would have stayed in it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But John's point is that, consistency in it and confessing what is the truth consistently, that's where our salvation lies. That's the fruit that people should be able to see of our salvation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're talking about verse 9. Anyone who runs ahead. Yeah, I didn't know where you're writing there, but
Yeah.
it's yeah. Yeah, sorry.
That was all right. That was all right.
Yeah, sorry. I was when you're reading that, I was lost and like, oh, I see it now. But yeah, I think that is that's a great you put it well that it's you're going to know it by the fruit.
Yes.
And if something turns sour, probably wasn't ripe to begin with.
Right. Exactly. And so he talks about remaining in the teaching of Christ. And I think it's good to clarify here. He's not necessarily just talking about him teaching to others who Christ was.
Yeah.
He's talking about the teaching that Christ brought. Mm-hmm. And then he as an apostle has heard that teaching, is walking in that teaching, and is now, in a sense, teaching that out. So again, it's interesting because it's classic John here. It's if you have the one thing, you have the two things, but if you don't have the one thing, you don't have either of the things.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of an interesting way to look at that. But we need to be following the teachings of Christ, is what he's saying. And then as we wrestle with our understanding of Scripture, there really is a line that we should not cross and cannot cross. And it appears to be what John continues to say is it's really about the nature of Christ. Mm-hmm. That is the line that we cannot cross. We cannot deny who Christ is, who he was, what he did, what he's doing now.
Yeah.
Because he's alive. Mm-hmm. I think it's funny. We always talk about, Christ in the past tense.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about his time on earth, but he is still alive. He is still interceding on our behalf, even now in heaven, right?
Yeah, and I like I'm kind of go backwards a little bit, but kind of relating to that in the first verse when he talks about the not only but also all who know the truth. Mm-hmm. He's saying that, like I said, all of us who know the truth, we have this in common. We share this as a bond.
Yeah.
And so even though we may disagree on some things, even though we may, he's not explicitly saying this, but I think what he does say this, that it doesn't matter what everything else is, we all share this common bond. And that's, like you mentioned there, that's really the story at the end of the day. And that's all that's important.
Right. Yeah. Now, tradition here is to receive people who claim to do the work of the Lord, right?
Yeah.
But as John taught us in First John, and as he continues to show us, we should be testing that fruit.
Yeah.
Okay, well, which Lord are you serving? Which Lord are you proclaiming?
Yeah.
Right? Whose work are you doing? Mm-hmm. Is it your work, or is it the work of the Jesus Christ that we know?
Yeah.
And so you're supposed to be showing people hospitality when they are servants of Christ, right? But John kind of flips this, and this is something that's interesting. If you go back into 1 John, as he talks about loving, and this isn't to say that we aren't to love everyone, right? Jesus tells us to love even our enemies, right?
Right.
But John specifically keeps talking about loving the brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Loving those who are in the church, right?
Yeah.
There should be a special place in our hearts for those who are in fellowship with Christ.
Right.
But those who come and say, give me that special place of honor, but I'm going to deny Christ, we should not have fellowship with. We should deny them entry even. We should say, look, I'm not going to put you up. I'm not going to participate in what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, it's one thing to show love to someone who is searching but doesn't know the love of Christ.
Right.
That's one thing. But one, as he puts in here, the deceiver and the antichrist, they are walking in that. Not only are they walking in that sin, but they are they are shoot, I lost my train of thought there. They're not just participating in it, but they're trying to mess up your own faith. They're trying to. I mean, they're a disciple of the devil. The disciples went out and they were proclaiming the name of Jesus Christ and trying to get people to accept that.
Yeah.
And these are disciples of the enemy.
Right.
And when the enemy comes at your door, you don't say, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Come on in." Yeah, you have to protect yourself from the enemy. And I think that's something that we don't think about a lot. But there is a call and a duty to protect your family, protect, especially leaders in a church, protect your family, protect those in your church, protect your church from those evil things and the things that are trying to purposely do you harm.
Right. And as John kind of shows us here in these verses that when we give place to them and we give them space to share their evil, whether we perceive it as evil or just misguided, we're essentially putting a stamp on it.
Yeah, you're helping them out.
Right. And we're giving people the appearance that we are in communion with them and that we are like-minded.
Yeah.
And we're not. There's a podcaster that I listen to, Lisa Childers, and I've heard her talk about this. People have, because she'll have these really great conversations about things like deconstruction and progressive Christianity, and kind of helps shine a light on that's not Christianity. Yeah. And there have been some people that said, why don't you have some of these progressive Christians or deconstructionists on your show to debate? Yeah. And she basically said, look, I don't have a problem with people doing debates, but she was like, but that's not what my show's here for. And I do not wish to give them any piece of my platform. Yeah, for sure. To try to share anything so false and so blatantly wrong with my audience, the audience that God has entrusted me with. Yeah, basically, right?
Yeah, I kind of look at it like I think Paul talked about this in one of his letters that. Well, and John makes it clear, if there is a spirit that you're unsure about, test it. Yeah. And so if there is it's like Jesus is like a what's the sifter or like a strainer, whatever. Like a strainer. Put everything in the strainer and shake it because Jesus is that strainer. And anything that falls through, that's Christ. And anything that doesn't, get it out. Yeah, throw it away.
He's our filter.
Yeah. And so we don't even have to entertain those things. Like we don't, like me personally, I don't know a ton about Mormonism. I don't know a ton about Islam. I don't know a ton about these other religions because I don't need to. I don't need to know them to refute them. Right. All I need to know is what is the truth of Christ. Yeah. And anything that's not the truth of Christ is not the truth.
Right. 100%. We've talked about this before. You don't teach people how to spot a counterfeit by explaining everything about every counterfeit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because there are so many variations of counterfeit. Instead, you look at what is the true dollar bill, right? Yeah. What is that true, that real piece? And then if you know the truth,
Yeah.
Anything that's not the truth will be apparent, right? And that's really good. I appreciate that. All right, so we do know that like this is exactly how false teachers were treated in that early apostolic church, was that they didn't have communion with them. They didn't afford them any type of support as teachers, but they also did not persecute them. They did not like, it wasn't like,
Don't throw stones at them as they walk away.
Right.
Just send them away.
right. It wasn't like what Paul or as Saul
Right.
did to the early Christians.
Yeah.
They did not persecute them. They did not try to destroy them, but
Yeah.
they refused to give them a place to speak their heresy.
Yeah. Yeah. And he doesn't really say this in here, so I could be just making this up and adding something that God didn't really say. But I take that to mean that, like, those types of folks, those are God's responsibility. Like,
Yeah.
that's not for us to worry about. You know, if somebody's that vehement against something like that, we're not really powerful enough to overcome that. You know, pray for them. You know,
Right.
we hope that they do come to know the truth. But that's something that God's got to take care of, not us.
Right, exactly. You know, we had a guy commenting on some of our videos who was clearly watching the entire video because he was like almost like taking notes and just leaving a bunch of comments down where he was trying to refute us.
Yeah.
But as I was reading his comments, it was like, he's not trying to refute us. He's just being bitter.
Yeah.
You know, and he's technically trying to refute us, but like you can see where he's coming from. It's not a place of goodness or graciousness at all.
Yeah.
And so I did hit him with some, you know, counter verses on some of his stuff.
Yeah.
And then of course he just kept coming back and he hit on a number of this, and there comes a point where you have to say, look, nothing I tell you is going to be good enough.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You're going to have this sense, regardless of what I say, it's not going to be good enough for you.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to pray for you that God will heal your bitterness, heal
Yeah.
your hurt, and hopefully reveal himself to you in a way that you understand.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think God already has done that, but you have refused him.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I gave my life to Christ when I was in college, and it was at this church that I went to that it was really life changing for me. And the lead pastor of that church said several times, and I've really taken it to heart, no one's ever been debated to Christ.
Yeah.
You know, no one's ever been in a debate and then they say, all right, you're right. We bring the water out. I'll get baptized. Like, it doesn't work that way. You know?
Yeah. No, you're right.